Welcome to This Explainer, everyone. Today we're going to unpack some seriously life-altering insights from the Book of Joy. We're exploring a real roadmap for finding lasting peace, in a world that is just constantly changing and, let's be honest, often incredibly turbulent. And we aren't just looking at abstract philosophy here. This is an absolute masterclass on human flourishing, and it's backed by both ancient wisdom and modern science. So, let's jump right into the core question driving our whole journey today. Can you actually discover lasting joy in a world that is just filled with suffering? It's probably the most frequent question people ask when they're facing adversity, illness, or heartbreak. I mean, if suffering is inevitable, and we all know it is, do we just resign ourselves to misery? Or is there a way to cultivate joy not just as some fleeting, passing feeling, but as a deeply resilient way of being?
Well, to answer that, we turn to His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. These two are basically mischievous spiritual brothers and absolute global icons of peace. But here's what makes their perspective so incredibly powerful. They have not lived sheltered lives. Think about it. The Dalai Lama has endured over 56 years of exile from his homeland of Tibet. And Archbishop Tutu, he battled the brutal oppression of apartheid in South Africa, plus his own personal struggles with prostate cancer. Yet, despite all of that, they just radiate this immense, irrepressible joy. So, how on earth do they do it? Let's explore what they fundamentally agree on when it comes to what actually drives us.
Section 1. The Ultimate Human Purpose. The Dalai Lama points out something so simple, yet so profound. Despite all our apparent differences, from the exact moment of birth, every single one of our 7 billion human brothers and sisters literally just desires joy and contentment. It doesn't matter if you're Buddhist, Christian, part of another faith, or one of the over 1 billion non-believers out there. Our fundamental baseline human objective is exactly the same across the board. We want to avoid suffering, and we want to find happiness. But, if we all want it, why is it so incredibly hard to hold on to?
Section 2. Happiness versus true joy.
Okay, so there is a massive difference between temporary sensory gratification and deep, lasting mental fulfillment. Our modern materialistic world focuses almost exclusively on the external stuff, right? Sensory pleasure, eating good food, listening to great music, finally buying that new car. The problem with that? It's entirely dependent on external circumstances. Basically, when the music stops, the happiness stops. True joy, on the other hand, is completely internal. It's a mental state of fulfillment driven by things like love, compassion, and generosity. Because it doesn't depend on outside stimuli, it can actually last 24 hours a day, no matter what crazy things are happening around you.
Pursuing purely physical pleasures just leaves us restless, bored, and ultimately unsatisfied. And science actually has a name for this. It's called the hedonic treadmill. Think about it. That first bowl of ice cream, absolutely sublime. The second one is, tasty. By the third, you're just getting indigestion. There's an ancient Buddhist truth that seeking happiness purely through sensory gratification is exactly like trying to quench your thirst by drinking salt water. You're just going to need more and more of it to get that same exact high. Now, the landscape of true joy is just incredibly vast. Emotions researcher Paul Ekman and Buddhist scholar Matthew Ricard have mapped out a whole spectrum, and it stretches way, way beyond simple sensory pleasure. It starts with things like amusement and relief, but then it moves all the way up to elevation, which is that incredible feeling you get when you witness a profound act of kindness. And it goes even further to mudita, or rejoicing in someone else's happiness, finally culminating in spiritual radiance. That's this serene joy born from deep well-being and benevolence. It really proves that joy isn't just a single, flat emotion. It's a rich, complex way of actually engaging with the world. But here's the catch. If true joy is a mental state, how does adversity play into it?
Well, let's look at Section 3, Suffering as a Catalyst.
Archbishop Tutu uses this absolutely beautiful metaphor of a mother in labor to remind us that nothing beautiful comes without a certain measure of pain and frustration. A mother knows without a doubt that she is going to endure great physical pain to give birth. But the exact moment that baby is born, you literally cannot measure that mother's joy. The joy doesn't just happen despite the pain. In a lot of ways, the suffering is actually a necessary ingredient for the life and the incredible love that follows. We can see this alchemy of suffering so incredibly clearly in the life of Nelson Mandela. As a young man, he was often described as a pretty bloodthirsty leader of an armed political wing. Then came 27 agonizingly long years in a prison cell. Now, a lot of people would look at that and say, wow, what a tragic waste of a life. But he emerges from that dark experience not broken and bitter, but as one of the most magnanimous, compassionate leaders in all of human history. He was actually able to put himself in the shoes of his enemies.
So the crucial point here is captured perfectly by Archbishop Tutu. He says the 27 years were necessary to remove the dross, meaning suffering and frustration aren't the ultimate determinants of who we are. Actually, scratch that. They are more like the fiery furnace that refines us. How we choose to face things that seem negative completely dictates the kind of person we become. We can become tight and angry, sure, or we can use the hardship to actively grow our compassion. But if suffering is inevitable and we really don't want to become embittered, how do we actively process that pain?
Let's explore that in Section 4, The Power of Compassion. The Dalai Lama shared a deeply personal story that illustrates this whole concept just beautifully. He was in Bodh Gaya, and suddenly he's experiencing this agonizing gallbladder attack. Sweating, intense pain, the whole shebang. During this brutal 2-hour drive to the hospital, he looks out the car window and sees a man lying on the ground. The man was disheveled, totally neglected, and looked as if he were dying. But instead of wallowing in his own severe physical distress, the Dalai Lama focused intensely on that man's suffering. And you know what happened? He completely forgot about his own pain. This remarkable sequence of events really demonstrates how shifting our perspective away from our own self-centered anguish and expanding it to recognize the suffering of others actually alleviates our own pain.
The Dalai Lama actually has a fantastic term for this. He calls it wise selfishness. He directly contrasts this with foolish selfishness. See, foolish selfishness is when you only think of yourself, which ultimately just leads to isolation, worry, and unhappiness. But wise selfishness? That's the profound understanding that if you want to be happy, if you truly want to discover your own joy, the absolute most effective way to get there is by taking care of others. And hey, this isn't just some beautiful, abstract spiritual thinking. Modern science is actually catching up and corroborating this ancient wisdom.
Section 5. The Science of Joy. So neuroscientist Richard Davidson has synthesized tons of neuroimaging research to map out 4 independent brain circuits that create a happy brain. We have the ability to maintain positive states, the ability to recover from negative states, and the ability to focus our attention. But incredibly, and this is a real game changer, we also have an entire independent brain circuit dedicated solely to our ability to be generous. We literally have hard scientific proof that our brains are factory equipped for cooperation. Generosity directly fuels our neurological well-being. So helping others isn't just a nice moral idea to aspire to, it is quite literally a biological imperative for a happy brain.
Which brings us to this incredibly beautiful Tibetan proverb that the Dalai Lama shared. Wherever you have friends, that's your country. And wherever you receive love, that's your home. This poignant wisdom perfectly encapsulates exactly how he survived 56 years in exile. Instead of viewing his exile strictly as a tragedy, he shifted his perspective. He chose to see it as a chance to leave the golden cage of the Potala Palace, meet the rest of the world, and build deep connections. He didn't just survive those years with bitterness. He survived with an open, joyful heart, all because he focused on connection and love. So, I'm going to leave you with this final thought and a question to ponder as you step out of this explainer and back out into your own life. How will you practice wise selfishness today? If the science and the lived wisdom of these 2 incredible leaders tell us anything at all, it's that your own true joy is waiting for you right on the other side of an act of compassion. Go out and find it.